we often go, we always go to France to buy wines, and at this time of year, the Will's plotted out a trip for us, and this year, I mean, we often go to the Loire, and further to the south, and maybe over to Provence. Certainly,
someday you want us to go to Bordeaux.
Someday I'd like to go to Bordeaux, Champagne, and Alsace as well. But this year you have, as he beckoned, the short version.
Yep.
You know, and I think, you know, in asking and being asked why we do this, we certainly have chosen wineries that we're very confident of. But I think if you're really going to do your job, it's due. You have to not just choose wineries. You have to choose particular wines each year, and these wineries make sometimes 10 or 12 wines, and
sometimes 60.
Okay. And each vintage, things will be better in one or the other, and so we don't only pick the wineries that we do business with, but we go in this case in the springtime to pick the wines that we'll do in the next year, and they're not always the same,
right?
And probably rarely the same.
We've got a couple of days in Beaujolais this trip, which should be fun in kind of our Burgundy program is pretty set, and there are a couple of producers in Burgundy who we're tasting with who are new to us, but we're not actively looking for a lot of new Burgundy producers on this trip. We're in Beaujolais in a bird dogging kind of way to try to find a couple, three more really quality driven but accessibly priced Beaujolais producers, which I will say I'm very excited about.
So we're coming back to you from months after we had talked about what we do on our trips to Europe or to South America or New Zealand or wherever we're off to, in finding specific wines to bring to the States. And what we were looking for then on this last trip was Beaujolais. Will had set up several visits, and before we get to talking about these two wines, I have to tell you that we tasted producers, probably 60 different producers' wines, and the fun thing about this is that yes, did I and our compatriots come back with something? Yes, we have, and Will's going to talk about that. But I also think that it opened up new avenues. One of the things that I was most intrigued by was a little hillock in Morgon called Puy, and one evening we did like 12 Morgons.
Right, from one vineyard. Yeah.
And that was little Côte de Puy, which I think means hill anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. But were really standouts, and I think that's going to set the tone for our next exploration of Beaujolais. But to these specific ones, Will?
Domaine Launay is a producer who we found is the ex-producer in the town of Saint Amour, in the crew of Saint Amour. We actually, by Launay, like many producers, has vineyards, parcels of vineyards sort of scattered around in different pieces in different crew. And so from Launay, we've actually bought the Saint Amour, which is literally the vineyard right out in front of his house and his winery, but also then a Julienas, which is a neighboring commune to Saint Amour. He seemed like Francois Launay, really kind-hearted guy, also a guy who we felt like was making really nice wines that particularly in this sort of like, let's start talking about Cru Beaujolais, let's start talking about why these wines are interesting and fun and great, and really fairly priced, he seemed like a great kind of first foot into the market.
And one of the things we walked away from as well was that, even though we've been doing this for a very long time, myself since 1975, Beaujolais is on the verge of redefining itself, or at least becoming schizophrenic. Because, don't you think?
Yeah.
Because what you're seeing is, in Burgundy, there's no more land to buy. And so what you're finding is Burgundians who have made a lot of money, and some money for a few vintages they made a lot. In Beaujolais, it's much harder for the vignerons. These wines are very modestly priced for what you're getting and how much work it takes to produce them. Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
So you see Burgundians going and buying properties in the south, in Gamay, and then taking their techniques and applying it to Gamay rather than Pinot Noir. And this producer is a Burgundian,
Right.
who has brought a really fine estate.
And so Villa Ponciago, what you have is this is a winery that is, or a domain that is now owned by Joseph Henriot. Henriot of Henriot Champagne, Henriot of Bouchard Perry Fils in Burgundy, of William Febvre in Chablis, and so what Joseph Henriot has done is sent down key members of his winemaking team from Bouchard Perry Fils with all of the great experience and techniques that they have brought to bear at Bouchard Perry Fils, and taken Gamay from Fleurie, from one of the greatest vineyards in Fleurie, bar none, and taken this great fruit and making, Larry and I have talked about this, unquestionably, Villa Ponciago is a great wine. What is unclear, I think, in some ways to at least to me and Larry, is this wine one of the greatest expressions of what Fleurie and what Gamay and what Cru Beaujolais can be, or is it in fact a very Burgundian vision of what Fleurie and Beaujolais and Gamay can and should be? And I don't know the answer to that question, and I think that's where watching the next 10 or 20 years sort of play out will be great to see kind of what happens. But it is great to have a train going on two tracks with beautiful classic wines that are now available and from nice producers in great vintages, and also wines that really push the boundaries of what it is to be Beaujolais, which is not to say they're overwrought. It's not to say that I'm not saying that this is a wine that is necessarily trying to be something else, but it is a very opinionated expression of Beaujolais, and beautiful and compelling for it.
So at any rate, there'll be more about that over the next few vintages as Will and I taste more wines like this, and I can assure you that we'll never depart from that as long as they exist, because I'm a real lover of classical Beaujolais. Thank you.
Stay tuned.